Hi everyone, delonewolf here, and welcome back to EVE Talk, your weekly look at the market in EVE Online. As always, we'll start with some news, and well, for development news or anything like that, I didn't spot anything that's too important. We did get the economic numbers for the month of July, so that was pretty interesting. Some people said that, well, that ISK injection that we got as Omega players just for logging in, like a drop in the bucket, doesn't mean anything. Well, we saw there on a 1 month period, it's definitely a lot of ISK that came in on a full, on everything that's available already in EVE Online, that's already established. It's a drop in the bucket. But for those 1 month numbers, it was definitely quite inflationary, with a lot of extra ISK being created, despite the fact that there was still like a negative ISK flowing out of the game from stuff like bans and the way CCP actually accounts for active ISK in the game. So there's also inactive for a certain period of time and things like that. I'm not exactly sure how they're measuring it, but overall, yeah, it was quite a significant amount of ISK that flowed into the game, which to me is a little bit surprising then, that we're seeing a ticker that's completely down. I would have expected at least a little bit of an inflationary spike in something, but so far it looks like almost all categories are still under pressure in EVE Online at the moment. Could be an opportunity to buy some cheap stuff here and there. Other news, CCP is hard at work for the Alliance tournament. Actually, apparently a lot of interest for that, with quite a few alliances that are going to try their hand at those feeder rounds. Haven't read up on any of the details, but I look forward to the Alliance tournament, watching it while mining, exploring. It's always pretty good entertainment. And then there's the first few like real life meetups that have started to pop up. Interesting to see that, including an EVE Vegas apparently in October. Well, let's see if CCP is holding back some information for those meetups. That could always happen, and it could be with some pretty interesting information on what they are working on. Let's take a quick look, as always, at the New Eden store, see what's happening over there. So sales are still happening. We've got this on at the time of recording. They do switch up quite quickly. You can see we get quite a few sales actually. Machina Rockbreaker skins, very diverse as well. Orca Rockbreaker, don't have that one yet. Could be interesting. Look at that, the Garmer Ghost Hex skin. So a couple of really nice green skins. For Garmer and Ortrus, Worm Vampire Hex, also quite a few good looking ones. Cormorant Vital Shift, Ego, and Jackdaw. I think this one is animated. I personally love to fly the Jackdaw from time to time, the Auto Jackdaw. Let's see if there is. No, this one doesn't look animated. I'm pretty sure that, oh yeah, a little bit on the orange lines there, but yeah, if you want to look pretty cool in your Jackdaw when you're exploring around in that one, definitely something to look. And look at that, just keeps going. Barghest Ghost skin, Rattlesnake Vampire Hex skin. I don't think I even have a skin for my Rattlesnake just yet. That looks pretty damn cool. Ooh, the Abyss Overglow skin. I think that one's really, man, there's a lot of really pretty cool skins. Look at that, with a nice animation here at the back. Man, that looks pretty damn cool. Yeah, a lot of them on sale. Not a huge sale if I look at the numbers here, but there's definitely opportunities. So if that's stuff that you're interested in, take a look. Let's see what's happening with the services. Nothing on sale here. So let's take a quick look then and start with the market plex stuff coming in at 4 minutes. Like that, and you may have seen it from the ticker as well. Plex under pressure a little bit, just above 2.6 million in JITA, and on the chart we are breaking down a little bit, getting prices to like 2.5 million on the chart. Definitely a bit of a trend break. We had found this band to move between 2.6 and 2.7 million for the average prices, and yeah, as I said, despite the fact that CCP printed all of that ISK, that those reserve keys are now available in the game, so all of that should create more ISK. we are seeing a little bit of deflation, a little bit of fear in the market. Are plex really worth 2.7 million at the moment? Well, it is summertime, not that much activity, not that much demand, and as a result we are breaking down a little bit on the trend. Also on slightly lower volumes, although I would say overall we're still in the higher volume range due to the tax changes, the lower taxes in NPC stations, which actually makes NPC stations competitive, if not even better than trading in player-owned stations. So in Jita itself we're talking 2.6 million, just above that for the sellers, 2.56 million, and then we shouldn't see that much of an impact from the trading hub. We get 4 sales happening in line with Jita, so you can see that they can't really undercut Jita anymore by quite a bit because of their lower taxes. Very competitive, and in fact slightly better, if I'm not mistaken, in Jita if you have full skills. And then the buyers, there's still a couple of buyers hanging around the Tranquility Trading Tower, including some new buy orders as well. Overall we are seeing prices dip a little bit, which means that the buyers must be dominating at the moment, so a little bit of plex dumping may be what's happening. Next up we've got the multiple pilot train certificate. That's actually following that trend on the 5-day moving average, which crosses the 20-day moving average on the downtrend and goes below 1.3 billion for the average price. It's just above 1.3 billion for the sellers and 1.24 billion for the buyers. Again, slight domination, I would say, for the buyers in who's getting the bulk of the trades happening in these items because of these average prices that we are seeing. So a little bit of dumping, which could be normal as well. Plex at 2.7 million, maybe a little bit too aggressive selling, which again to me feels a little bit strange because of everything that's happening ISK-wise. I would rather hold on to my virtual gold, to my plex, than sell it at the moment. But maybe if you manage to buy for 2.2, 2.3 million, you want to make that trade happen, that would make sense and puts a little bit of pressure on these prices. Same thing with the extractors, right? If you bought below 2.6 billion and you can still sell well above 3 billion, why not go ahead and make that trade happen? Perhaps that is what's happening at the moment. A little bit of liquidation of these trades as well, now that these taxes are of course lower, and that does mean that your profit margin is higher more easily. So that could make sense, actually, a little bit of sell pressure because of the tax changes. Then we've got the skill extractors, of course, that follow plex very closely and break down to a price of less than 300 million ISK, 295 million for the sellers and 290 million for the buyers. Again, Jita definitely taking over the trades once again because of its lower taxes, and then you still have a couple of buyers hanging around the Tranquility Trading Tower, but buyers are also being dominated by the activity in Jita itself. And yeah, I think that this is going to be the main explanation now that I think about it. The tax changes have increased volumes and have also incentivized some players to get a sale going, to take some profits, which is putting that pressure on the price. So it could be a slight buy opportunity. If, like me, you do expect inflation to take hold a little bit in the upcoming months as players come back and all of that good stuff. But we have been trading, of course, at a higher range for all of these items as well. Let's take a look at the impact on the skill injectors then. Here are the large skill injectors that have basically started to move sideways in their own band as well, 600 to 630 million ISK after reaching a bottom price of 570. Now they still have room to grow from that perspective, right? 700 million at the start of the year, down to 570 buy opportunity, and now, well, an uptick, but nowhere near the 1-year highs at this point. 622 million for the sellers, well, 622 and above 600 for the buyers as well. That's interesting to see a little bit of that buying pressure. I think that's why we are pretty stable in the current range, because there is some demand for large scale injectors. I would say higher volumes here as well. In all likeliness, I'm going to say that there's quite a bit of speculative ISK going into the large scale injectors. If you're looking for something to buy, of course, well, the plex chart doesn't look that great for it. The large scale injector chart does look way more juicy potentially when it comes to buying. There is just this one little problem, of course, for the skill injectors is that CCP has been very generous with skill points. So there is not that much need, I think, for players to buy these skill injectors. On the other hand, if you're expecting perhaps a mining meta shakeup with the announced changes to mining ships, we don't know anything that's going to happen just yet. But if it's like a move out of Rorquals, out of Orcas, and into other ships, perhaps there is this readiness by a part of the player base as well to expect like a shift and a use of for skill injectors to create new pilots that would then be the new meta for mining, rather than just dump all of your Orca pilots or something like that, and maybe do something else with those. So that could be a little bit of a reason to invest in these skill injectors if you expect something like that to happen. Large alliances are definitely known to do stuff like that, right? To just buy lots and lots of skill injectors so that they can create lots of pilots into the new meta in order to just strengthen their numbers as well. Small skill injectors still independent. That's really cool, something that you don't really expect that often. Large ones still 5-day moving average, just above 20-day moving average, basically sideways for a month or so. And then the small skill injects, look at that 5-day moving average below the 20, clearly under pressure, going below 130 million ISK. Not what you would expect to see for an item that's basically created out of these large skill injectors. 125 million for the sellers and 121 million for the first buyer. We went below 130. Yep, so we're definitely sliding down in price here for these small skill injectors, moving at their own rhythm. I think affordability is a little bit more is the reason why these small skill injectors really have their own way of moving in the market. The large skill injectors around 600-700 million ISK, definitely a little bit more expensive and feels a little bit more risky to jump into that one for the market. So if you want to get some injectors, then I think small skill injectors are like a less high threshold, and that more players will decide to maybe buy a small skill injector for use or also as an investment. And at the moment though, a little bit of a sell-off in this one. Prices under pressure, going below 130, more deflation rather than inflation in the current circumstances. Could also potentially be another buy opportunity. As you can see here, we started here at 140 million ISK. Then we've got the daily alpha injectors. I love this personally, a little bit of a jump up back above 40 million ISK, which is right in line with its normal average, and 40 to 45 million, making that the daily goal for an alpha player to earn himself a daily alpha injector, and those more skill points makes a lot of sense to me. Supply wise, we are clearly drying up, so this may be, do we have like some extra sales or something like that happening? No, does look like we get a little bit of supply crunch in the daily alpha injectors, as we're down to less than a full page of supply, going for 43 million in Jita and up. Buyers are forced up to 38 million as a result. So a little bit of gains here. I like that we're sticking around that 40 million, that we're not sliding off anywhere. I think it does show some alpha player activity in the game. Then we've got the hypercore market, which again, big surprise to me, just breaks down below the 280,000 mark, which to me is like, it felt like a little bit of support over the last couple of months, and was a sign that, yeah, all right, the market is expecting some more inflation in the game to take hold, because we were climbing out of that. We climbed out of that very violently all of a sudden to 300k, and then we just managed to stay above 280, which is also like the first part of the chart, the normal price under normal activity. But we are breaking down, sellers down to 266,000, buyers at 260. Clearly more expectation of deflate, or signs of deflation in EVE Online, of signs of maybe overabundance coming back, and they're already preparing for lower prices from all of that on average. But yeah, the hypercore, definitely a niche item for the Hypernet relay, but something that can be bought bought anywhere, used from anywhere, and as a result, feels to me like something that does gauge maybe general activity in the game, but also general monetary situations like inflation or deflation. And so now the market is clearly telling that it's expecting some deflationary pressure here, and that is completely counter to my read on the ISK situation. But we will see. Perhaps also a one-time injection could actually tighten the belts later down the line or something like that. Let's move on to the mineral market, coming in at 14.55. Let's see what we can spot here. So we already saw that on the ticker here we've got titanium back down a little bit, 5-day moving average below 20-day moving average, so a little bit of sell pressure coming in here. In JITA itself, for minerals, that's always the better metric. 455 now for the sellers. It was 450 not that long ago, and then 433 for the buyers. It's pretty flat at the current range. Above 450, I think a lot of players are seeing that as a pretty good price point, so there's a little bit more supply coming in. We crash back down to a little bit below that, but then supply holds off, and so you get a really flat chart, a little bit above, a little bit below, and it's clearly the 4.5 that is being played with the most. Then we've got pyrite, which last week I think was under pressure a bit. Well, overall, honestly, same thing. Flat for the last 2 months or so, around the current price range, maybe 17, 18 is something like that. Yeah, 17.8 for the sellers, 17.5 for the buyers, and right now you can see that again, 5-day moving average below 20-day moving average. We're in basically a lower end of the period, so I do expect supply to dry up a little bit, get us back above the 18 at some point, and then we can go back down, and this is basically that 18 is the price range that we are hovering around for pyrite. Then we've got a Mexelon that knew a very sharp pullback after the April rush that happened, and yeah, same thing here, more pressure, 5-day moving average going below the 20-day moving average. In fact, that wedge is opening up, so I would say that there is definitely some pressure on the Mexelon prices at the moment. Well below 60 at 57.5 is for the first seller, going up to almost 58 pretty quickly, and then 56 for the buyer. Super narrow margin, but at you could say the lower end of its trade range. If your read is that, well, for some reason we are getting titanium, pyrite and Mexelon pressure, sell pressure, and there's a little bit more supply in all likeliness and less demand or steady demand, which means lower prices. Should be a different story in the LOSIC charts. Here is Isogen basically flat, and yeah, here we still have the 5-day moving average below the 20, but you can see that that gap is narrowing. So here basically I would say that the demand and supply are finding each other a little bit more at the current price range. 57.8 for the sellers, 57 is for the buyers, pretty much. Again, very narrow margin in all of these minerals. We're still plagued with the same problem. You can see that here, 3 sell orders, 78 days to go. So older sell orders definitely like up for 11-12 days, and they are of 23, 61, 28 million. But look at what's happening actively. 600,000, 2 million at the high end. These are the expected, to me at least, the expected normal volumes for sell orders once everything becomes like reliant only on the currently created Isogen in LOSIC. Numbers way down, and that should mean higher prices, because of course if we're bouncing up against 110 million units of Isogen that are ready here at around 58 ISK, we're gonna have to bounce up against that price again and again until we whittle this down. Then down here you get another 50-60 million units waiting us at 59, and then you get a little bit more at 70. But yeah, it's still that same story. So for me, this is an indication that Q4 to end scarcity does make a lot of sense. It gives us a little bit more time to still chew through these reserves for Isogen that are clearly going down in number. It's no longer billions of units and hundreds of millions of units that are showing up. Sellers are a little bit more I think aware of the situation as well, spreading their sell orders out a little bit, trying to sell a chunk at 58, but then also a chunk at 59, then going above 60, then going at 70. They're basically ready for that upside potential that Isogen has, but at the moment, of course, they're constantly stifling that move because of all of their extra supply that they have available. Should be different again in the Noxium chart. That this is a chart that feels way more responsive to what's happening in game. A 1 year high, probably an all-time high above 2000 ISK for Noxium here in the April rush. Then of course we've got the new industry situation, which meant lower demand. Then we've got a summer slump, all of that bringing us down to a low point of 1000 ISK, losing 50%, but still 1000 ISK for Noxium, a single piece of Noxium, is a pretty damn good price. And then we're starting to see that same pattern as with Tritanium, too low, so we're holding off on fresh supply. We managed to make our way to 1250. That's not that bad, an increase in price, and then we're seeing some supply come back online and bring that price back down a little bit. Feels way more natural in response than what's happening in Isogen. 1100 for the sellers and almost 1100 for the buyers. Again, super narrow margins for all these minerals so far. Then we go to Nullsec. We've got Zydrine, apparently a bit of pressure here again. You can see 5-day moving average going just below the 20-day moving average again. We also saw a significant amount of mining happening in Nullsec now that the war is over. I do think that that's just going to go up again in volumes. With in the monthly economic numbers, we saw that a couple of Nullsec regions now close to the top of the amounts being mined. So I'd say that there's definitely going to be a lot of Zydrine and a lot of megasites potentially finding their way to the market on the rebuilding efforts and the preparations for whatever the conflict will evolve into. Almost 900 ISK, 880 to 885 for the sellers of Zydrine and then 835 for the buyers. Definitely below average on this 1 year chart, but again suffering from the April rush that then meant a little bit of a slump. And yeah, I think this is where in the economic numbers we start to see Veil of the Silent really have decent mining numbers in line with what's happening in some high-sec regions value wise, and so that's a lot of supply, steady supplies that are finding their way to these markets. And then Megasite with a little bit of a surprise bump a couple of weeks ago up to 700 ISK, completely digested in a matter of 10 days or so, and we're now in fact back below 600 ISK for Megasite, 590 for the sellers, 552 for the buyers. First mineral with a decent margin between sellers and buyers. That's pretty interesting to see that in a Nullsec one as well. It's completely dependent on imports from outside of JITA to be brought into the market, and yet they're able to open up a little bit of a gap here. Doesn't mean that they get a lot of those to trigger, but it does show a bit of a different dynamic in all likeliness. All of a sudden a bit of an oversupply dynamic for Megasite, which is entirely possible. Part of me also thinks that that's what happened a little bit with this massive downturn and with the inability of Zydrine to defend 1000 ISK, which it had done for like the first 8 months of the year. Then after that, complete breakdown. I do think that basically Veil of the Silent overmined a little bit, creating too much supply, and that because of that we are moving to these relatively low average prices for Zydrine and Megasite, considering that they're way cheaper than Noxium at the moment. And then finally we've got Morphite, our standout because it's tied to Tech 2, showing some more deflation, you could say, going back below 100,000 ISK by quite a bit all of a sudden. 90,000 for the sellers, 85,000 for the buyers. It's still extremely expensive. My reference point for that is that back in the good old days I used to do investments in Morphite when it was below 10,000 ISK, so it's still super expensive, but we are seeing a little bit of pressure on the price here despite higher volume, so I would say that that's good news for Tech 2 producers. Then we're moving on to the PI market, coming in at 23.55. Let's take a look at these. With deflation or with lower prices so far in both the plex stuff and the minerals being the general trend, I don't think we should expect good news in PI. Advanced PI here, I think that things could still be somewhat okay. You know, like here, being able to defend 1.5 million is pretty important, but clearly we get a little bit of pressure. Anything that was already suffering from a lack of demand will not be pretty, I think. Still above 1.7 million for the sellers, buyers above 1.5, so a little bit of margin opening up here and a little bit of pressure on the price, but we're coming from a decently high point, and so here it feels like that's quite okay. But then we should construction blocks, all right, a little bit of surprise, although it's still quite relative. Of course, we got a move up in the price heading towards 8,000 ISK on average, but we are of course also coming from a 1-year low point of 6,000 ISK for construction blocks, so this is still not that great of a price. 7,500 for the sellers, 7,100 for the first buyer. Normal price 10,000 ISK, so this is still 30% below. We basically got a little bit of a bounce from a 1-year low point that happened here. Then we get consumer electronics, also last couple of days trying to bouncing back to 6,000 ISK, so same story, 1-year low point, and I think here we basically have a little bit of buying happening because of just how juicy the chart looks. If you can buy below 5,000 ISK, you know, long term, if you expect some reason for increased value for PI, then that does make a lot of sense. It's just probably the cheapest you've ever been able to buy. Consumer electronics, 6,000 for the sellers, 5,500 for the first few buyers. But this is not a sign that we are in an upside market or something like that. This is still very much under pressure. Then we've got coolants, that is basically finding its bottom range at 6,000 ISK. That's a massive pullback here, losing 30% of its price from about 3 weeks ago or so at the end of August. That's quite a heavy pressure, and it just continues. 5,800 and below for the sellers, 5,500 for the buyers. Yeah, poor. PI materials tied to fuels, I think overall these are currently suffering the brunt of the pressure. They had been doing okay over the summer actually, but now it's just a complete breakdown. Crowd protected solutions able to stay, you know, all right price wise, but below 100,000 ISK, so clearly not starting an upside move either. Sellers at 99,000, below 100,000, and 87,000 to 88,000 for the buyers. If you want to be ready for an announcement for implants, again, buy this below 100,000 ISK. To me, that makes a lot of sense. Enriched uranium tied to fuels, same pressure, heading down to 7,500 ISK, 7,900 for the sellers, 7,400 for the buyers. And yeah, it's just a lack of buyers. You can see that very clearly here again. There's not enough demand for the current supplies. Integrity response drones, that's advanced PI material, has that new demand due to the industry changes, doing a little bit better, actually still slowly edging up on those daily averages. Currently selling for almost 2 million ISK, buyers coming in at 1.7. That's definitely not bad. And then our mechanical parts, more bad news, tied to fuels, but even this one started out at 7,000 ISK and just still going down to 6,000 ISK at this point, close to another 1-year low point, with the first seller coming in at 5,800. Basically some desperate sellers because there is no demand. 5,250 ISK for the buyers of mechanical parts, probably close to the cheapest ever again. Nanites then, first one to also break down a little bit. I do expect that we could see the same thing as here with construction blocks and consumer electronics happening by next week in the nanites. In fact, volumes have started to shoot up here as well, but another 1-year low point heading for 4,000 ISK, 4,900 for the sellers, 4,100 for the buyers. That's yeah, soon nanites, stuff like nanites, which actually, you know, it's a refined PI material, is going to cost as much as one piece of Noxium that you mine out in space. So if this continues, well, it still has a ways to go, but you know, clearly before this, right, we had like 10,000 ISK, 12,000 ISK for refined PI materials, definitely a completely different range for minerals. And now you actually have stuff like Noxium going for 1,100, 1,200, sometimes even 2,000 ISK. At the high point, those price ranges are closing quite substantially. But this, nanite's actually pretty important for some stuff, including implants, and then also this one right here, nanite repair paste. And if CCP would come out with more BPCs for injectors, or is it injectors? It's for yeah, I think so. Like that boosts your SP gain. Then nanites have usually been in the part of that process as well. So here you get a 1 year low point of something that is definitely needed in a couple of niches for production in EVE. Then nano factories, advanced PI, again a little bit of pressure here, but able to defend a decent price range. 870,000 for the sellers, 850 for the buyers. Organic mortar applicators expecting the same thing. Are we still above 750 for the sellers? No, couple going down to 730,000 disc and 720 for the buyers, but you can see very quickly we go up to 790 and then 850,000 disc. And then here again you've got better demand than all of the basic stuff. Recursive computing modules still having a weird data point, making it a little bit difficult to read the chart, but back above a million ISK and actually counter to everything else. We've got a first good that's going up in price here, going to 1.25 million, buyers at almost a million as well. Robotics tied to implants, yeah, again playing with the 1 year low points at 55,000, 58 for the first seller, 53 for the buyers. Self-harmonizing power cores, bit more of that pressure, but above 1.5, sellers 1.6, comfortably above that, buyers almost at 1.5 million. Pretty decent. Sterile conduits still well above a million as well, able to defend that range easily. Ukami superconductors, right, a weird one, did a jump up to 90k, couldn't tell you why. But a super quick response from the market here, again pushing us back down to close to a low point. 67,000 for the sellers, 61 for the buyers. And then finally the wetware mainframes also showing a little bit of pressure, could be below 1.5 now, just below 1.5 for the sellers, 1.4 for the buyers. So advanced PI materials has that inherent increased demand because of the industry changes. They're doing okay, but almost everything else is clearly under pressure. Next up, advanced moon materials, 31.35. Alright, like that. Let's take a look at these. Most of this, especially in Tech 2 production, had normalized a little bit. For instance here, crystalline carbonite for Galente production went back down to 150, back in the normal range. We are on an up move at the moment, 175 for the sellers, 157 for the buyers, but to me, it in all likeliness will plug that very quickly and we're basically back where we were a year ago. So still it's above average, but it's still within a normal range. Then for Caldari, it's titanium carbide, which is trying to move back down below 200. Still a little bit of a premium on this one, 210 for the sellers, 185 for the buyers, but clearly again the peaks went from 350, 300, 250, above 200. You know, on some more pressure now. I think we're fully normalizing here as well. That is my expectation. Then we've got Fernite carbide for Minmatar, which is still above the 150, started here below the 150, but again you can see those peaks that keep going down, so more pressure. If we go below 150, we're right back in the normal range, and I think on a down push that's possible. 152 for the sellers, 153 for the buyers at the moment. And then we get tungsten carbide for Amar. That is again moving up a little bit from the normal range, so this to me feels like another regular upswing. Not a lot of demand here. Let's see if there's anything around Cheetah. Nope, 184 for the sellers to 180 for the buyers. So a little bit of a drying up of the availability of tungsten carbide is pushing the price back up. But overall, this one's already back in line with the prices of a year ago, fully absorbing the April rush and the crazy high prices. Metamaterials were pretty steady for the whole year, so let's start with photonic as always for Galente. still just above 12k. Normal price, honestly, there's not that much to tell unless all of a sudden we see a big change here. Pretty regular, so should be steady for Take-Two production, non-linear for Caldari. All right, there is something to take a look at here. Breaking down below 20,000 ISK, moving to the low end of the chart. 18,000 for the sellers, 17.8 for the buyers. So let's see how quickly this can turn around. But for the first time in quite a while, we've got part of Caldari production going below average on the chart. And it is in the non-linear metamaterials. Then we've got Minmatar, so plasmonic metamaterials, right back where we were a year ago, 17.5, something like that, 17.2 for the sellers, 17,000 for the buyers. Really narrow margin, bit of pressure, but basically still quite all right. And then terahertz metamaterials, back below 15k, sellers 15,000, buyers 14,000 almost, so low end of the range here as well, but still quite doable. For the other advanced Mu materials, expecting more pressure, fermionic condensates showing that 1 year low point, and we're starting to move sideways just above 50,000 ISK. We're talking 54 for the sellers, 51 for the buyers. Yeah, started the year at almost 90,000 ISK, managed to defend 70 for quite a while. This is clearly not doing that great. Ferrogel, bit of a bounce, but a bounce from the lowest range below 30,000 ISK. So that's really, again, that's just the market responding to a 1 year low point, but no more than that. Fullerites, not a 1 year low point, but clearly going below 750, spooked the market a little bit or spurred some investors to jump in. The hypersynaptic fibers going for above 9k, still 9,300 for the sellers, 8.6 for the buyers. That pressure still existing despite the fact that we're clearly pretty low. Nano transistors, same story, able to defend 4,000 at 4.2 and 4,000 for the buyers, but the pressure just still remaining despite below average prices. Phenolic composites seeing a bit of pressure here as well at 1750, down to 1680 for the buyers, 1580 for the sellers. Basically recovering as well from the high range here in March to June. And then we've got ceramic fibers that still had a bit of a premium as well. Again, March to June, look at that, high price around 500. We're back below 400 and we're staying there. 390 for the sellers, 320 for the buyers. Yeah, that's pretty much in line with the ranges before this bump right here. That means that we can take a look at Take-Two ships coming in at 3640. So all I did was I did sell my confessor, so bought for 35 million, sold for 45 million. I think that's definitely not bad. 10 million profit on something that costs 35 million. This is including taxes, by the way, so this is my net profit for that confessor trade. But other than that, just didn't feel like I wanted to spend too much time in JITA, so I haven't done any more buying or anything like that. I'm still holding an endurance that's going up in price a little bit, bought for below 20, sellable at almost 23, so 22.5 or something. So at the moment looking at 2-3 million in profit, which is still not enough for me. Bought Manticore at 27, sellable at 30, slight profit again. Oniros looks pretty decent, bought below 165, buyers are up to 170, sellers 185. And on the chart, yeah, actually on the downside, so still willing to wait it out and get maybe like a 190 or something like that. And then the Prospect bought for 21, still looking at a loss at the moment for that one. But let's get started. Here is the Basilisk chart. As we reach that low point again for like the last 6 months, we do have a volume spike that pushed the price back up, but getting plugged very, very quickly. So we're not moving back to like a 280 million or something like that. 212 million for the sellers, 200 million for the buyers. Basically a pretty narrow range for the Basilisk. I want to buy well below 200 million, to be honest, so that's just not the right place to either buy or sell for me. Then we've got the Cerberus that did go down to 200 million, which was a buy opportunity. A little bit of a volume increase and a bit of a bump. We're at 226 for the sellers, 207 for the buyers. I can imagine if you bought right here at the tail end of that downtrend, you could have bought below 200 million. You're already looking at a little bit of profit, but the worrying thing is how limited the bump from that range is at the moment. So if you're looking to actively trade, that's not great news. I did like sort of warn you guys, I think, about that in the last couple of weeks. If I'm looking at Take-Two now, I am looking at that for like medium to longer term investment, let's say winter or something like that. That would be my horizon. So I'm really looking to buy close to 1 year a low point or something like that before I really jump in on any of this stuff, because this was somewhat what I was expecting. We are still in the summer war. The war itself is completely changing dynamic. Don't expect that much of need for alliances there to all of a sudden come in and buy whole Cerberus fleets to replace them and things like that. So a bit of a slowdown in this was definitely in my expectation. The other worrying thing is I was then banking on a little bit of general inflation as well, and at the moment the plex stuff market is clearly expecting the exact opposite. So it remains a little bit of a gamble. I'm still gonna hold to my philosophy. This starts to look pretty nice. Guardian chart still going down, starting to hit the 180 range. So if we could buy below 180, which we can, this looks really good. 188 million for the sellers, 177 million for the buyers. You can probably buy 179 or something like that at the moment. That would be, in my opinion, a worthy investment. But same story last time for the Guardian. I bought for 185, sold for 200, so you can clearly buy well below my previous buy or trade in the Guardian. But yeah, keep this in mind. Don't expect next week to be the week where you will be able to sell that Guardian for 200 and up. That's probably not going to happen. But yeah, Guardian, you know, locking one in below 180 would definitely be worth it for me personally. Then we've got the Hound that's staying below 25 million. Where are those buyers? Still at 22. No, need to get rid of these 10, get close to 20, preferably below 20, which is still a little bit of work. So for the Hound, I'm gonna have more patience. Does look like if we've got a little bit more momentum, we could look at a buy order, buy opportunity there potentially as well. Ikitursa, still seeing a little bit of pressure here. That's pretty good news for Trick Stuff. 775 for the sellers, 640 million for the buyers. Still very expensive, of course, for a Take-Two cruiser, but showing some stability and supplies, I think, from Trick content, which would be good news in my book. Then we've got the Ishtar, which like last week was clearly not at a 1 year low point, so I was still, I think, hesitant when it comes to the Ishtar, but you could have made a move considering this was reaching the low point of the last 6 months, and you could have probably bought well below 200 million. We're back at 214 for the buyers, 227 for the sellers. But yeah, are we gonna get to 250 and 280? Probably not. We're gonna, in all likeliness, stay down here with the peak for the Ishtar. So slight trade opportunity here, but for me, not enough. Basically, I would have bought and I would not be looking to sell at this point. Then we've got the Manticore, again doing a bit of a bounce, but 30 million and that's it. It doesn't have more in it. 27 million for one seller, but then moving just above 30 million and 27 million for the buyer. So that's again too narrow a margin, not a place where I would jump in or be selling. Then the Munin did go down to 1 year low point, close to 180. So if you can buy below 180 for the Munin, that makes sense to me. It's 190 now for the buyers, 215 for the sellers. And again, this is the bounce, right? 215, compare that to the 250 and the 280 at the height of the war. Still clearly on a downtrend. Again, look at these now, not as Twitch trading, where a lot of these, honestly, I did like within a week. I managed a lot of these trades. That's, in my book, not gonna happen right now. Nemesis, I'd need to see that touch 20 million for the buyers. They're still at 22, 21, so I need to get rid of another 10 on the buy side. 24 million for the sellers. Yeah, that's another no. Oneros, yeah, this one is way harder to gauge in my opinion, because reaching 150 will be super hard. 170 for the sellers, 185 for the buyers. Honestly, if the chart goes well below 180, you could probably look at buying. Are we seeing some pressure here? Well, unfortunately, all the CCP interventions is not making the Black Ops Battleship, in my opinion, good gauges for general production costs. I would expect a little bit of pressure on this, but yeah, it's just too volatile to be able to call this a trend. 1.35 billion for the sellers, 1.25 billion for the buyers. Yeah, a little bit of a spike that just happened here in the Panther. Then we've got the Purifier. Kinda looks interesting again, like about a week ago you could have probably bought just above 20. Now we're buying at 22.5, and again the bounce here is very limited. Scimitar, again same story, although I would not have bought here, I don't think, unless we managed to buy below 180. It's 195 now, so that's another no. And then the Widow. The Widow is, alright, a little bit less bubbly at the tail end here, and you can see the pressure going down to a billion ISK. 1.1 billion for the sellers and 830 million for the buyers. This may just be a demand problem, but if we look at this from the perspective of are people willing to let go of these Widows for a lower price at the moment, because if you try to produce them now, it's probably costing you less than, let's say, 6 months ago, 5 or 6 months ago, then yeah, that does look to be the case here. And then finally the Zealot, back below 200 million, but yeah, I need to buy for 180, close to, yeah, actually you are here again. No demand for the Zealot, and you're able to buy super close, even below 180 million. That looks pretty interesting considering this chart. So for me this week, and again, I'm not looking to buy now to sell next week. I'm looking to buy now and then sell when something happens in the game, and all of a sudden you get a nice sell opportunity. So definitely a longer horizon. Guardian looks interesting, and Zealot looks interesting. The others, yeah, too early. I'd love to see them lower. Then we've got the Tech 3 ships that's coming in at 45.40. Right, managed to normalize my time as well. We saw the Confessor, so I sold for 45 million including taxes. We're still slowly edging up here actually. 47 million for the sellers and 42 million for the buyers. That's probably close to what I sold, a little bit below this I think. But yeah, we're running out of Confessors. There's not enough supply, and so this one is moving up in price. The real question of course is, where are the others? Generally, Confessor, Hecate and Jackdaw have been able to command a similar price. So let's see where the Hecate's at. Jumped up to 55 million, and this of course explains why the Confessor is drying up. You're not going to focus on that production. 53 million now for the Hecate, 49 million for the no, almost 50 million in fact to the buyers. And we've got last couple of days, it's just here of course where the action is quite normal, considering how much more expensive these are. So to me this was not exactly expected, but definitely a bit of a tradable peak here all of a sudden for the Hecate. And then the Jackdaw is actually moving up back to 50 million as well, 52, and then going for 60 million very quickly on the sellers. Last 24 hours almost all availability, so definitely a bit of drying up here as well. 46 million for the sellers. If you have made investments on some of these downtrends, this is a great time to be selling because you're getting a pretty good price, and I think producers will be happy with these prices as well. So I do expect supply to bring the Jackdaw back down to maybe like this price range here, 47, 47.5. Hecate should definitely normalize towards 50. And then yeah, the Confessor, I don't see the volume action here or anything, but I do think this one still has a little bit of room to grow, considering that there's still that much work to do in the Hecate and the Jackdaw. And then the Svepel, is that one still lagging behind? Yes, it is. And this is a gamble that I've done before. Do I still have a Svepel here? Yeah, bought for 41, sold for 44.5, so not a lot of profit, but you can see here you can buy for 41 million. So I probably managed to buy below this, considering this is again including the taxes, and sellers at 44.6. But what we should see now, and this is granted, there's no guarantee of this, but if there is a need for a lot of Hecates and Jackdaws at the moment, and then even the Confessor is drying up, I do expect that you're able to do something similar to this again, where you buy now for 41 million, and then the Zwepel has room to make a jump well above 45 million, because these guys should absorb a lot of that potential supply. So that's something to look into. If you're looking for that one trade, I would buy a Zwepel or two. Then we've got the cruisers. Here is the Legion staying below 200 million. Basically a bit more expensive because you don't lose skill points anymore, and I wouldn't make any moves here, honestly. Loki commanding a price of almost 230. Not a chart I would make a move. Proteus is falling off below 180. Yeah, 177. Okay, you're buying below 160. So this to me doesn't feel like as calculated a buy as the Zwepel, but the Proteus is perhaps worth a gamble, considering that you're buying well below 160. If we can get that to show up here below 160, yeah. If you really, but again, consider this a gamble, because you never know how this is going. Or I couldn't tell you how the cruiser markets are working at the moment. And then the Tengu still above 200 million, basically recovering from a one-year high point. Yeah, maybe, you know, if you feel risky, then you could definitely try to buy a cheap Proteus at the moment. And then for the extra product this week, I chose to take another look at the Marauders. So we've got advanced battleships, Marauders. Kind of curious to see if those have made any moves. 50-10. Because, I mean, they are now, in my opinion, the best level 4 mission ships. They just have crazy potential, which meant that they were going up in price right here. That happened here in February, from well below 1.5 billion, 1.1 billion to 2 billion. And they've been able to defend that margin for quite a little bit. But you can see the pressure here as supply was slowly overtaking, and maybe lower production costs were starting to put some pressure on that. And yet, here we go, jumping back up. 1.8 billion for the sellers, 1.6 billion for the buyers, back in a more expensive range. Then we've got the Golem, right, went up to 2 billion as well. Bit of a breakdown, but nowhere near the 1.25 to 1.5 billion before. 1.8 again to 1.6. And then for the Kronos, yeah, a little bit less popular apparently, able to go below 1.5 now. Alright, and then we get the Minmatar with the Varger. I think that's a good mission ship. So that one is above 1.5 at 1.9 billion for the sellers, almost 1.6 for the buyers. This is just personal interest here, seeing what happened to the Marauders. Lost a little bit of ground, but basically still at a pretty big premium. And that's it for this Eve Talk, guys. Thank you very much for watching, and as always, I'll see you next time.